be roll.
Okay, I'm back.
Oh, back and better than ever.
That was our intermission.
Yes. Intermission. Well,
that was the break in the VHS tapes.
Yes. That was the break in the VHS. Now we have
only
a whole other
15 more to go.
There's something I want to show Ryan real quick. Is I just show him again my Titanic credibility. I'm probably one of 2 people on the entire planet that actually has a Ghost of the Abyss poster hung up.
Uh-huh.
Which I'm pretty sure is like only 3 of those in existence because nobody likes that documentary.
Yeah, I went to the I was at the screening of it when it came out, and we got to do a Q&A with Jim Cameron and Bill Paxton, and I actually have a press kit for Ghosts of the Abyss that I literally just ran across the other night when I was unpacking some boxes.
Cool. No, that's another part of the Titanic memories for me. It's like I remember, like that was another documentary that poster. I don't know why, but just resonated with me so much. I can still remember why, because it was only available, I think, in IMAX when it first showed up. I think it probably was only ever available in IMAX.
I think.
I don't know why, but it just resonated with me so much. I can still remember why, because it was only available, I think, in IMAX when it first showed up. I think it probably was only ever available in IMAX.
I think you're right, because I saw this. This was really odd because, you know, when Diana's book came out, I kind of feel, you know, sort of the times my path has crossed with Cameron. Okay, we got a phone call sometime in '96, I remember, and it was a woman who was calling up and she wanted to order a copy of Myths. And she had a credit card, and she's like, can you take my credit card over the phone? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So we take her order, and I just happened, I had an assistant at the time, and she was out, and I just happened to answer the phone and take this call. And I'm taking the info from her, and there was something, I don't remember what it was. There was something odd about the credit card number or something like that. And I was like, is this by chance like an American Express or a corporate card or something like that? And she's like, yeah, it's a corporate whatever. And I said, oh, well, I need is there a company name on the card? Because yeah, the company name is Lightstorm. And I said, Lightstorm Entertainment. And she's like, and it was kind of like reluctance, like, yeah. And I said, okay. So we sent them the book. So I know that Jim Cameron, you know, had our book. We had the website, and we had the catcomedia.com website for a long time, and we sold copies of our books on catcomedia.com. So you could buy the Elvis book, and you could buy all the other stuff we had, and Titanic. And I would do like news stories and things that were relevant to our books, to our subjects. So like if there was something about the Titanic that was interesting, I would do a news feed on it, you know, and then always point people back to our book, you know, here, buy our book. And so out of the blue one day, I get this invite for Ghosts of the Abyss. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird that you're calling me, but went to the press junket, you know, and went the night before and saw the movie, you know, in the IMAX theater, and was very impressed with Cameron and Bill Paxton. Got half an hour with each one of them at the press junket, you know, and then that was it, you know. And then a few years later, in 2005, I got a phone call, and the phone call was like from somebody, or it was a phone call or an email from somebody that was like with Cameron's company or Cameron's advertising agency or his publicist or somebody, and they want me to like run, I think it's like what do I want to say? I think they want me to run like teasers or trailers for this new show, okay, on my website. And when I get the teasers and I get these things, I'm looking at them, and it's a documentary that's raising the question of whether or not fire had a role in the Titanic disaster. Okay, and immediately my radar screen, I'm kind of like, whoa, wait a minute. This sounds a lot like Diana's, you know, work and her theory on how the coal fire may have had a significant structural impact to Titanic. Okay, and so anyway, that was kind of like, it kind of bothered me a little bit, I guess I want to say. And I wrote a review because Diana was very much upset about it. She's like, what, is he honing in on my work, or is he now seizing my theory that there was a coal fire on the ship that may have weakened a critical bulkhead? Because Diana was really the first one who came along and said that, And so we wrote a review and we said, basically, Jim Cameron is now tackling the subject that we tackled over 10 years ago. And then I never heard from Cameron again. So I mean, I'm not going to flatter myself in thinking that Cameron probably cares about my opinion, because I don't care about my opinion, but then what was really interesting was that he did give us permission, to shoot on his soundstage at Manhattan Beach. So, when Park Stevenson, when you see him on camera and you see the wreck behind him, and then you see Ken Marshall and you see the Titanic looming over him, those were the models that were used in his movie. So we filmed that on his soundstage. So that was very gracious and very nice and very, very generous of him.
Oh, because I was going to ask, because I obviously I recognize those models. I was curious, how, obviously I know that wasn't part of your budget to recreate the models. Right. But no, right. Cool.
The on the subject of Cameron, I was very flattered that Cameron allowed us to use the soundstage. Those models are gorgeous. I mean, those models are absolutely beautiful to look at. They were always kind of on my bucket list. But I'll tell you what was really cool about going into the Manhattan Beach studio where he's at is when you walk in, the very first thing, of course, that dominates the room is Titanic. Because this model's 45 feet long. And then positioned right next to it is, of course, the wreck model, which is at the same scale, so it's just the bow and it's enormous, but then when you look around, there's all of the relics from Avatar, and there's the alien, from Alien, and it's like a museum of James Cameron special effects oddities and stuff. So it's a lot of fun to walk around and look at that. And of course the Renault town car is in there, Yes, the town car is in there, and there is also a full-size lifeboat with the davits. Okay,
oh, really?
that is in there. Yes, and so that was a lot of fun. You see pictures, but you really don't realize how big those lifeboats were and how tall those davits were until you're standing there next to them. It was a pretty fun day of filming that day.
Now, obviously, that's not open to the public, so that's invite only. So it's not you just kind of walk in there, pay the toll, and take a picture and leave.
Of course. And the whole reason that we were invited in, we were granted permission to do this, was because of Parks Stevenson. So, Parks has been a consultant a number of times, starting with Ghosts of the Abyss, going forward with anything Titanic that Jim has done. And so, Parks had made the request, and I'm sure if I had made the request, it probably wouldn't have been granted, but Parks made the request, and they said, sure, come in and film. So that was really awesome, being able to kind of cross that off my bucket list of things I wanted to see.
Right on. Oh man, you're living the dream, Ryan. As a young Titanic fan, you are truly living the dream.
They are, like I said, they're trying to put together right now. I know that there's numerous expeditions that are being put together. We have not seen. I think it's going to be really interesting. Whoever gets to the Titanic next, actually gets down there with cameras, or either the cameras or a manned submersible, because we haven't seen the wreck now in 8 years. And it's going to be really interesting to see what transformation has happened, because those that I do know who have been down there said that the last visit, that the upper superstructure area, the officers' quarters, the wireless cabin, that was getting very, very frail. So I would not be surprised if when we get down there next time, if all of that has not probably collapsed into itself. And, that's kind of a tragedy in and of itself, because like the Marconi room, there are so many pieces of instrumentation and stuff that could be brought out of the Marconi room, and brought to the surface and put on display. These are things that are going to be lost forever once they fall down into the structure of the ship and disappear.
Yeah, I have a question. Like, going back to the whole thing with the bursar safe, is there a reason why no one would try to claim that, or not claim it, but try to retrieve that?
Well, you got to understand. You got to understand the purser safe and what it actually is. It's not really like a safe. It's more like a big strong cabinet is what it is. Okay, and it runs basically floor to ceiling. So you're dealing with something that's like a big tall column, and it's going to be a very hard piece to retrieve from the wreck. Also the purser's office is on B deck. So you've got the boat deck, then you've got A, then you've got B. So you've got to somehow figure out a way to drag that thing. I'm not even sure how you would go about it. You would probably have to find a way to drag the thing to someplace like, say, the grand staircase opening, which is just adjacent to where the purser safe is at. But you've got to drag that thing. Number one, there's not a whole lot of room to get an actual submersible into the wreck. Okay, yes. So you're going to have to do this via remote ROV vehicle. And I don't know, personally, I have not seen anything. I have not seen any ROV vehicles that have the kind of strength or the kind of power to be able to pull something like that out. The other thing is, in my mind, you would sort of have no idea once you started pulling on that thing what kind of structural collapse you could cause. Right. So I think if you're going to get the purser safe, I think what you're going to have to see happen or wait for this to happen is, I personally think you're going to have to just sort of wait for the superstructure to systematically collapse. Okay, and once it collapses far enough and just deteriorates, eventually what will happen is, like we have the officers' quarters on the boat deck, and we have that upper superstructure and the gymnasium and all that just sort of falling in on itself. Eventually, A deck is going to fall in on itself, and eventually then, B deck will fall in. And I think as these areas begin to fall in, something like the purser safe may actually sort of expose itself. And now you have the ability to just, wrap a chain around it and haul it via submersible to a recovery basket. And that's how I think, if we're going to get it, I think that's probably how you're going to get it.
That's one thing I am ignorant about. So thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, the handles. The thing with the purser safe is, I can't remember the book, but you should try to find this book. I can't remember if it's Exploring the Deep or what book it was that Cameron did. But in the book, Ken Marshall, again, amazing visual artist. Ken Marshall, in addition to painting all these wonderful paintings that he's painted of the Titanic that look like photographs, he has also got a very keen eye for doing mosaic work. So he takes all kinds of video imagery and still imagery, and he's able to stitch it all together in Photoshop, and he's able to make these incredible views of things that we would not organically be able to obtain. And he actually put together a photo montage that appears in, I think it's Exploring the Deep by James Cameron, or Jimmy C, as I guess we call him. But there, in that book, there is a beautiful picture of the safe sitting in the middle of the purser's office, and there's actually a close-up of the handles on the front of it. And I don't believe that it's like necessarily a locking safe, or I'm not seeing a place for a key if there is, but it's probably covered by all the rusticles and everything on it. But I've even inquired, what would it take to get an ROV in there and just have the ROV try to pull on the door handles and see if you could get the doors to open. Because you have to assume that after 100 years on the bottom, that there is water in that safe or water in that, in that cabinet, and that the pressure is going to be equal. I mean, that's kind of a given. I just don't know what kind of debris is laying in front of it, wherein you might not be able to get the doors open.
It's funny you mentioned looking at the ROVs. When I picture ROVs of Titanic, I think of Jake and Elwood from Ghost in the Abyss. I think these little boxy things that God, I know that's the entire subplot of that film, is them getting lost in the wreck and Cameron having to go find them.
Exactly.
But like you said, so you painted this image. You have this, this file cabinet, for lack of a better term, that spans an entire floor essentially, and you're sending in one of these things that's 2 feet by 2 feet. That's tethered by what I think he even described it. It's almost like a spider's silk that just communicates what to do. And imagine this poor little thing trying to tug this thing open or go through it with such finesse. But like you said, I would imagine today's ROVs are probably 100 times more sophisticated than those two things were.
His bots, Cameron's bots, were very state of the art, because the really great thing about Jim Cameron and his exploration is that Jim, from what I can tell, he doesn't really seem to spare any money or any resources in developing the tools that he needs to go explore. So he didn't go borrow an ROV or a camera system from somebody else, from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute or anything. He actually had these things designed and built from the ground up to serve his purposes, and I really admire him for that. I think that is just so cool that he has the resources and the ability to do those things, but he pays attention to detail.
Oh yeah, because I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was his brother who was the engineer that designed those things for him, I think.
Yes. In fact, in that press kit for Ghosts of the Abyss, I think there's a whole bio on his brother, because I was kind of flipping through that the other day, and I was reading that, and I was kind of amazed at how much talent there is in that family.
Oh yeah, I guess that's like I said. You gotta give. It's funny. Everybody's because James Cameron's in the headlines again because he's attacking the Marvel movies, and everyone's like, "Can you believe he's insulting these movies?" And I'm like, "He's Jimmy C, man. He's earned the right to complain about whatever he wants to complain about. He's earned that right. It's like you know what? He made Titanic. He gave us Terminator. He gave us True Lies. I guess again, I've discussed things about James. It's funny. James Cameron's such. I mean this in the most pleasant way possible. He's an enigma. Man, he's kind of up there with Michael Jackson or George Lucas in the sense of an entertainer that you can never get inside their head. They live such a unique life, or they've experienced so many special things. It's you can never, intersubjectivity, just get inside their head. So it's you know what? Let him do what he wants. He's got more than enough money. He doesn't know what to do with it all. Please. And he said he minds his own business other than making... threatening to make another Avatar sequel every year. He doesn't make the next one.
Well, he is neck deep in Avatar right now. He's making, as I understand it, he's actually making 5 sequels right now. I think he's doing them all at once, and is just going to release them, systematically one every year or whatever. So when you say that kind of, goofing, but he's actually doing that.
I know. Oh no, trust me. Not to get into my history of James Cameron, but again, 5 years old Titanic, really, and this is before I was into Star Wars, and so I really kind of worship it at the altar that is James Cameron. And Rob was with, because I was on the hype train so much for Avatar. Rob was with me. I got to see a special preview event that he had in August before anybody knew about the movie. I was evangelizing about it. I'm this is gonna be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And Rob and I went to high school together, so he can attest to all this. And so Rob and I sat there. We were in the theater as soon as we got out of school that day. And I remember once it was over, Rob and I were oh my god, because I love James Cameron more than Rob. And I didn't like Avatar. He's James Cameron. He gave me Titanic. He gets a pass. No other director would get that level of a pass, but he does. And like the first Avatar sequel is supposed to come out in 2014. And the joke I keep telling people is that every year he does not meet his deadline, he announces 2 more sequels. And the rate we're going, he's going to have like Avatar like 15 or 16 soon. It's not a joke. And now, like, I've amended it to say that every year he doesn't make his deadline, he threatens us with another sequel. And I give him so much, like I said, if he actually makes Avatar 5 through 6, good for him. He's earned the right to do that. But, like, I think it's worth noting that James Cameron's been very quiet about, like, other films that, like, been making money. And now that Black Panther beat Titanic at the domestic box office, I think that's genuinely scaring him. Because it's only a matter of time until something finally takes out. I know Star Wars beat it in the U.S., but internationally, Avatar is like ahead by like $700 million.
Right.
But he's getting nervous. Now, you can
and it's inevitable. It's inevitable that he's going he's not going to hold the box office record forever. It's not going to happen, you know. And it's a matter of time. But you know, I mean, at the same time, I don't know. I don't know if Cameron, I don't know enough about Jim Cameron. I don't know enough about Jimmy C to know whether, to know whether or not he's really driven by that. I really consider one of the respect that I have for Jim Cameron is for that of a storyteller. And I really do believe that based upon what I know of him, which again, I don't know him personally, but I know people who do, and he just seems to be driven by the art. And, you know, it doesn't hurt that he makes really good money with his films, but I think that he is above and beyond anything. He is an artist, and that's where it's really at. And you know, like all artists, we're all terrible with deadlines. I mean, you know, if I hadn't had the network kicking me in the butt for Titanic, I may not have been done with it by now, you know, because you tend to just keep on working on it, nitpicking and fine-tuning, and you just have to learn at a certain point to say enough. But I will admit, and I will say, and I've said it in public before, that Jim Cameron was a big inspiration to me as a young filmmaker when I was making Amityville. Because I remembered an interview that he gave, and he always said, and I still carry this with me to this day, he says, if I was going to do Titanic, I knew that I had to do Titanic bigger than anybody else had ever done Titanic, because it had already been done. And if you don't go way further, then what's the point? Okay, and that really stuck with me. So when we were making Amityville, you know, what is the number one character in the Amityville series? It is the house. Okay, the house is what everybody wants to see. It's the same kind of principle with Titanic. You want to see the majesty of the ship. You want to see this huge, stately ocean liner, you know, that's down by the head in the water, lights ablaze, you know, while the band is playing Near My God to Thee. You know, it's that incredible visual. Well, with Amityville, everybody knows the story for the quote-unquote haunted house with the eye-like windows. So I remembered in making Amityville, I remembered sort of thinking of it in terms of how would Jim Cameron approach this? And my answer was, we have to have the house. We have to have the most accurate version of the house that has ever been presented on film. So not having the resources of Jim Cameron, I was sort of forced to go with a half-scale version of the house and then employ an over-cranking technique with a camera to make it look bigger than what it was. So my feeling was in doing the Amityville documentary is, you know, I can't tell the story without having the starring character, which is the house. And if I can't have that, then what is the point of doing it? What is the point of going forward? So hence, we built the house, and we had that visual, and we had tons of footage to work with. And you know, I still think about that in anything that I approach nowadays. It's like, how do I take a subject that's already been done and do it better?
like I said, as much grief as I was giving Jimmy C, the amount of incredible respect I have for him, I just want that on record. Like, he did lose a couple of points for the Blue People movie. Like, he did lose some points for that. But you know what? Like I said, if it was any other filmmaker, again, he gave me Titanic and he gave me Terminator. So you know what? He gets a pass.
I've seen all of his movies. I think I've seen all of his movies with the exception of Avatar. I've never seen Avatar. I saw the Blue People, and I looked at that, and I said, I already had the Smurfs growing up on Saturday morning. Okay, so I'm all done with that, I moved on. And I just wish, if I had one thing I could say to him, I would just say, Jimmy C., go make me some more films I want to watch, like True Lies, okay? Because I love True Lies. Tom Arnold in True Lies was like the pinnacle of funny. I mean, when he was telling Schwarzenegger, that he came home and his wife had left him, and then he says, she even took the ice cube trays. What kind of sick bitch takes the ice cube trays? I mean...
Same exact thing happened to me with wife number 2. Remember? I had no idea nothing's going on, right? I come home one day and the house is completely empty. And I mean completely empty. She even took the ice cube trays out of the freezer. What kind of a sick bitch takes the ice cube trays out of the freezer?
That was a great movie. That was just a great movie for a number of reasons.
You know, it's again, quick tidbit on True Lies, is that I've been waiting for True Lies on Blu. Like, it's impossible to get a copy of True Lies. For some reason, Jimmy C will not release that film. They've had Blu-ray remaster of that. I guess that was 20th Century Fox. Has been sitting on that for like 5 years now, and he will not let them release that along with The Abyss. They're just sitting on a shelf, and like obviously Cameron has the clout to have Fox does whatever he wants.
Right.
It's been sitting on a shelf. It's like 2 movies that are not on Blu-ray. And no one can figure out why. Because I've heard stories that he's embarrassed of True Lies now because he doesn't like the idea of making terrorism funny. Like, I've heard he really doesn't know. Like he does not want to be associated with that anymore. It's kind of like, Steven Spielberg in Temple of Doom. It's like something like, I don't want to touch that. And in The Abyss, nobody knows why he will not release The Abyss on Blu-ray. Like it's just, you can only get it. Like, I don't think it's available. I think you can get used on eBay. It might be available maybe on iTunes or you can buy it digitally, but it's on no streaming services, or at least I don't think it is. But he's released it on if you have Stars or Encore, HD Master. They use the HD Master they used to create that they would use for the Blu-ray. He will not release a home video version of those films.
Interesting. I would have always just assumed that if you wanted to buy a copy of either one of those, that you could go to Amazon and pay your money and get it. That really surprises me.
Yeah, I guess the DVD's around because that's been in print forever. But if you want, again, there's no I would imagine someone at this point probably done their own HD remaster or True Lies, but it's not obviously it's a bootleg more or less.
Right.
Yeah, it's just an interesting fact that again, considering you're our Hollywood contact line now. Once you get your next film work finished, you gotta get a hold of Jimmy C and say we want that True Lies Blu-ray.
I will tell his pal Parks that he needs to cough up. He needs to get Jimmy C to cough up a Blu-ray. That's the least that he can do. Okay.
Exactly. Tell him we'll forgive him for no Avatar 2 through 14 if he gets that True Lies Blu-ray out there. We'll forgive him.
That's the thing. Those of us who are filmmakers, we can just be these quirky, weird people that, just decide not to release things or just say, I don't like that anymore and I'm not going to do it. I mean, I can honestly say that with our Amityville project, the Amityville project has been just such a difficult and tedious project, and it was surrounded by so many really I'm not going to pull any punches. It was just surrounded by so many dark people and so many bad memories and stuff like that. That's one of those films where it's I don't really care if it gets released on DVD. I don't care if we sell any more copies of it. I don't care. You know, I see Amityville as sort of being my past. It's something that I did. It was a case that I worked on, that I answered all of my own curiosity and my questions about it. And there's sort of nothing left there for me anymore. And the funny part of it is that Titanic, I don't feel that way about. Having made the film, I'm going to tell you, right now, we're pitching a sequel for Titanic.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Whether it will get made, whether it will get picked up, I don't know. But it's definitely not a subject that I have ill feelings about or didn't have good memories making. I would dive back in and I would do another one. And I've definitely got my hat in the arena for an expedition.
Oh,
That's
man.
so cool.
Which I'm going to tell you, which I will tell you, was supposed to happen this year. We were supposed to be leaving on May 15th. And about a month ago, the whole thing just sort of fell apart and just kind of evaporated. It's not dead, but it's definitely sort of delayed. But I have people, I don't know where you're at, Zach, on it. I don't know if how you would answer the question when asked, but people will say to me, they'll be like, would you really get in that little tin can submersible and go down there? And my answer is, hell yeah, I would go down there in a heartbeat. Well, but what if something happens? And I said, let me put this into perspective. If you're in a submersible and you're at the Titanic, okay, and let's just say one of the windows, one of the portholes decides that it's going to leak, okay, you won't even know that it happened, okay?
Yeah.
Because a pinhole leak, you will implode in like 1/10 of a microsecond, and you are now plankton in the ocean, okay? So guess what? As long as I didn't see it coming, okay, I'm all right. You know. It's getting trapped. It's getting trapped at the wreck, entangled in some rigging or some wreckage or something, and being forced to sit there and wait to run out of electricity and air and suffocate. That would suck.
Yeah, because I remember, again, going back to Ghost of the Abyss, I know there's the whole, like, subplot with, like, Bill Paxton, and he's like, what do you think about going down there? And he's, like, harassing the submersible tech. He's like, what happens if this goes? And the guy's like, well, we didn't do this. Then what happens if that goes? And it's like all these, like the fact they have contingencies for everything.
Right.
Like if somebody, like if it was there, obviously, it's only like you said, it was like what, three organizations on the face of this earth that will go down there for you. If someone was willing to foot the bill, or if I had the money to foot my own bill, I think at this point, like you said, why not? Like it's again the pressure. It's instantaneous death. I just hope I die after I saw the wreck. Like, this is worth it. You gotta cross the finish line. Like, you can kill me afterwards, as long as I get to experience it. That's all I want in life. No, if someone's wanting to foot that bill, I'd be like, you couldn't stop me fast enough. Just because it's just one of those things where it's just the idea of, even if you didn't like the Titanic, or just you didn't like the history and just the cultural impact of it, just to say you were able to do it, and like we already stated, the wreck could last 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years. Who knows? It all depends on Mother Nature.
Right.
And I think just the idea to say that you did it, even if you didn't appreciate Titanic as a fable or just a concept, I think you have to do it. Unless you really were just paranoid about something like that.
Exactly. I mean, it's bucket list stuff. You know, I mean, it's being able to say that I'm one of not very many people who have been there. You know, and got to look out the porthole and got to see it firsthand. You know, that seems, you know, pretty amazing to me. It's life is about opportunities, and it's about the moments that you get like this, and you got to grab them. You got to take them when you get them, because you may not ever get them back again. And you know, who knows? I may get to go to the wreck next year. We may be able to be part of an expedition to get it put together and make it happen, or I may never get another opportunity. I don't know, but I can say that if the opportunity presented itself, I would most definitely go.
Oh, definitely. Well, one thing I want to ask you is that for God, ever since I was a child, there's always been rumblings. There's always some sort of like eccentric billionaire, much like Jimmy C in his Avatar sequels, threatens to build the Titanic 2. And the ultimate I was waiting for Rob to laugh.
Are we talking about like an actual like another ship that's gonna like a cruise ship?
A modern reincarnation of the Titanic.
Okay.
And the first thing that always comes up is, oh, no one would ever book a ticket. The stigma of being on the Titanic 2 would be so high, no one would ever do that. So never mind the idea of it being really kind of like blasphemous. The idea of like it's kind of like building another World Trade Center. It's like do you really want to do that? Like you can build a Freedom Tower, but you can't like rebuild the same thing. So my question to Ryan is, would you, if they ever did create a Titanic, another Titanic in the sense of, but was modernized, would you get on it?
You know, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why I don't think so. Because, you know, just all of the modern engineering and just everything that they would have to do, you know, to comply with today's building standards and all that stuff, it wouldn't even be remotely close to being the same vessel. You know, I mean, yeah, you can theme it like Titanic, but you're never going to have the beauty that was that ship and the craftsmanship that went into that thing. You're never going to experience the Titanic in that kind of setting the way that the people traveling on the original one did. And to me, it would feel kind of like a commercialized, cheapened knockoff. You know, I mean, I personally, I would rather just go walk around someplace like the Queen Mary, you know, and that's as close as we're going to be able to get, or to go see the Nomadic, the passenger tender in the Belfast Quarter, you know, that to me would be far more satisfying than cruising, you know, across the ocean on a replica.
All right.
Would you get on it, Zach? Would you take the Titanic too?
Once again, if I had the money, I don't know, because like I subscribe to this philosophy of I'm gonna do X just so someone can't say I didn't do it. Like within reason. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go do heroin today because somebody said I did. It's like I'm not gonna do anything that extreme, but it's like this something like, again, if it's safe for the most part. If it was economically feasible, I was like, no. If they're asking for something like $4 million a ticket, it's like, there's better ways to spend your money if you have more than you know to do with.
I want to know where it's taken me. Like, is this just a ship that's gonna go? Because it's like, hey, Titanic 2, we're gonna do a tour around the Americas. Like, I would get on it if it's taking me somewhere I needed to go.
Well, it'll be a cruise ship.
Okay, if it's a cruise ship, I probably won't get on it. Like, that's not enticing to me, being stuck on a ship that, you know, is just a giant mall and people are trying to sell me things.
Well, I think it would be... I
subscribe, Rob. I kind of subscribe to that whole theory. It's like I look at that sort of. I put that in the same category as I would say a weekend in Las Vegas. Right? It's like I've been to Vegas a million times, and it's like, to me, there's nothing to do in Vegas unless I'm walking around gambling. Okay, and it's just not really my thing.
Well, it's worth noting. I think Ryan, have you ever heard the show Rick and Morty?
I can't say I have.
Okay. Well, it's kind of like South Park is still around. It's an animated show, and it's highly satirical things. I know Rob watches it, and there's an episode where one of the characters of the show is like a huge Titanic fan, and so him and his wife go on the Titanic experience. And what it is, it just shows, again, they're making fun of the whole fact that now, like, you're taking a tragedy and you're commercializing it just for the sake of making money off of it. And the whole point is that you go on the ship, you get to recreate all the, like, you dress in the attire. Obviously, it's supposed to be very reminiscent of Titanic, James Cameron's film. And what happens is that the whole point is you're supposed to survive the sinking of the ship. And they're mocking the fact that there's probably some sort of Titanic experience out there, and the whole point is that there's an accident on this experience and the ship doesn't sink, and that's the controversy of the entire episode. The ship doesn't sink. What are we going to do?
Is that what I think it is?
Yes, every couple gets to recreate Jack's drowning at the end of the movie. It's so romantic.
I can't wait to do that with Beth.
I don't know, Jerry, with all due respect, it seems like your wife may not be that interested.
Look!
Iceberg right ahead. The buffet is now closed. Iceberg right ahead. The buffet is now closed.
Sir? There's not a problem.
What do you mean, there's not a problem?
The guidance system isn't putting us on a direct collision course. This ship is about to completely miss the giant iceberg.
Well, do something! Steer into it!
I'm trying!
It's too late. Ladies and gentlemen, don't brace yourselves.
No! What happened?
The rail system must have failed.
We have to refund people. We can't have that. The Titanic cannot not sink. And I think that's essentially what a recreation of the Titanic. Like if you tried to rebuild the or do a what would it be like a emulation of the Titanic? It's like it becomes inherently macabre, where it's like you're recreating this thing solely for the fact that it was a tragedy. It's like that's the reason why we know the Titanic. It was a tragedy. We don't know it because like the Queen Mary. The Queen Mary is remembered because of the luxurious ocean liner of the 1940s and 50s, not because it had a horrible tragedy associated with it.
Well, and you know, and that tragedy is the whole reason you hit that right on the head, is the whole reason why we remember the Titanic. Okay, you know, I'm going to venture out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that I don't believe that anybody would remember the Titanic if she would have gone the way of the Olympic. Okay, you know, if she would have served at sea for 30 plus years and simply become inefficient and too big of a liability, and she was sold to the scrappers and she was scrapped, you know, I don't think anybody would remember her at all. Because the thing to remember is that you had the German competition boring down hard on White Star Line. Okay, so Hamburg America, Albert Berlin, who was the head of Hamburg America, when he took over Hamburg America in like the 1880s, it was like, you know, the smallest shipping company in the world. When he was in charge of it in 1912, it had become like the biggest shipping company in the world. Okay, and Berlin was already laying keels for three ships that were 50,000 tons each, that were longer than Titanic. You know, the Imperator, okay, which was actually launched a month after Titanic sank. The Imperator was far, far bigger than Titanic. And one of the things that she had that even Titanic didn't have was they had figured out a way on those German liners to run the casings for the boiler rooms sort of like up the side of the ship and not directly up through the middle like we saw on the Olympic class liners. And they were able to create, as a result of that, these huge ballrooms that went from like one side of the ship to the other. And even Titanic and Olympic and Britannic later did not have that kind of luxury. Okay, so literally the Germans were on the cusp of really stealing the thunder from the British in terms of the luxury, the size, and all of that. So if all of that would have played out, and let's just say for giggles that World War I would not have happened or would have happened much later, I don't think anybody would remember the Titanic. I don't think anybody would remember the Olympic. You know, if Britannic were lost later in the war, no one's going to remember that because ships are lost all the time at war. You know, so that's kind of my perspective on that. And I think that I kind of subscribe to the idea of Park Stevenson that World War I, had the Titanic not sunk, that World War I would have probably been very different as well.
That's another aspect of the film that doesn't get enough credit. Is just that perspective. Is that how Titanic? Like, everyone looks at Titanic and kind of looks at it in a vacuum. Again, and because of things like James Cameron's films, like, okay, it's the socioeconomic thing of the passengers, first, second, and steerage. And people don't forget this did not happen in a vacuum. Like, Titanic wasn't launched. It was just like predetermined that it had to go to the bottom of the Atlantic. Like, there were other things, and that's why another reason why we love your film is that it shows that there is a much larger universe than just the people surviving that night.
Right. I think what's so interesting about the Titanic is that she's in a very interesting a very interesting time in the world. You know, you have politics that is sort of like invoking the First World War, and we've never even seen anything like the First World War before. There's never been a conflict like that, and we're also at a time now when our economies are changing. We're becoming more industrial. You know, the thing that I don't know if I can't remember in the version of the film that you guys have seen. I can't remember if you've seen or if I mentioned that the economy was growing in 1901, from like 1901 to 1913 or 1912, late 1912. The shipping industry was growing by $45 million a year. Okay, now $45 million a year. Think about what $45 million in 1912 was. We're talking about an industry exploding by the billions every single year. You know, the world was a very different place. We needed, you know, we were shifting from coal to oil. Okay, you know, it was an amazing time. You know, it really was an amazing time, and you know, that's something that people lose sight of what the world looked like, and you cannot get to the bottom of a disaster like Titanic without understanding what was going on in the world.
Oh, absolutely. Like, because Rob, one of my many nicknames that Rob gives me on this podcast, I'm the connoisseur of context. and I think you really, it's like anything in life. It's like I remember even when I was in college, like, because I studied a lot of political science, and I would like study things. And I talk to people I explain things like, well, how do you know that? I'm like, folks, if you want to understand how things worked in the past, you got to look at what surrounds the story, because chances are you're going to find out why it happened the way it did. Once you know the center of it, the answers lay around the center.
Right.
And
right.
It's just, like I said, that's, I don't know. Like I said, it's like when somebody else appreciates that, never mind actually follows through on it, it just means the world to me.
Well, but I think you're definitely going to like the director's cut, because it's going to definitely take you further and further and further down the road into the disaster and into the politics and into sort of, you know, what was going on. It was, you know, and again, you know, to go back to the whole J.P. Morgan thing, that was a wildly interesting story, because, you know, Morgan, they barely recovered from Titanic, you know, and they sort of survived the Titanic disaster, and they sort of got through that, you know, and then no sooner did that happen than they lost Britannic in the war, you know. So I mean, it was like I kind of feel sorry for them in a way, because it was like they were dealt two horrible blows. You know, they needed both of these ships in order to make the company work, in order to fulfill J.P. Morgan's grand vision for this massive conglomerate of shipping companies that he wanted to create. And it really is sad. And you know, it's like Ismay, I feel bad for Ismay for the fact that you know, here's the chairman of the line who lives his life in a virtual seclusion after the Titanic disaster, you know, and dies, you know, in 1937, you know, after being ostracized by the world and being called things like J. Brute Ismay, you know, for you know, getting off of the ship while women and children died. There were so many people who suffered after this. Zack, there is a book, I cannot remember what it's called, but if you have not read this book, you should read it. Okay. It is about the impact that the Titanic had on the survivors going forward. And it tells the story of a number of their lives and what happened. For instance, there was one woman who had survived, and she remembered, if I remember right, she remembered hearing the foghorns of the Carpathia as Carpathia was coming into New York that night. And she always associated the foghorns of the ship with the disaster, and she could never get past it. Okay? And so she was on a ship. She was coming into some place. I don't remember whether it was New York or where she was at. and she heard the foghorns, and she ultimately went and jumped off the stern of the ship and committed suicide. You know, another one. God, I can't remember which one it was. It was, I want to say Jack. Yeah, I think it was Jack Thayer's father. Jack Thayer's father, I think it was, went. He drove someplace. He parked in like a park or something, and this is like in the 50s. So this is like 20, 30 years after the disaster, right? 40s, 50s, sometime in there, and he literally just sat in his car and cut his own throat. I mean, the stories, the impact that the Titanic disaster had on these people's lives was, you know, this was not just something that just happened and they just went on. You know, this was a life-changing event, and that's something that I never hear talked about. But I will try to remember what the title of that book is, and send you the title of the book, because it was a really fascinating read.
Oh yeah, and that's worth even noting too. Like I said, we did a little research for this, and we see like in the again, this is just a broad term, but like in the comment section of people talking about Sinking the Mist, people obviously with like Bill Mueller, like, well, why didn't he come forward? And people have to realize, like, back, not even back then, but even like 10, 20, 15 years ago, like there is this concept of shame, of surviving an event, like survivor's guilt. In that it's not like today where like there's this thing that goes on, again, everybody's politics, to each his own, but like anytime now we have like a shooting somewhere, everybody immediately takes their phone out and starts filming it. And it's like the whole idea is that people have to realize, like, when you survived a tragedy like this and people died, people did not feel the urge then to automatically associate themselves with it and tie it to their identity.
Right.
And so, and I feel like so when people like criticize someone like Bill Mueller and say, well, why didn't he come forward? It's like folks, like there is I guess people can't comprehend that anymore. I guess that's such a antiquated concept in our culture. And that's what people have to realize, that it's not like today where somebody survives a national tragedy or a tragedy of any sort, and it becomes tied to their identity. Like that's not how things worked years ago.
Right. We definitely, as a society, we definitely process things. It's like we do not, as a society, as a whole, as a culture, have the reverence for life that we did back then. We have it's like you see there's a shooting. It's like you said, there is a shooting, and without getting into politics and all of that and how messy, this country is these days, everybody's like forming a victims advocate, group, and everybody's running around doing this, and it sort of goes back to what we were saying about the Titanic disaster. There were people who went their whole lives without ever admitting or ever telling anybody that they were a survivor of the Titanic, because it was very different back then. You wanted to put that behind you, and you wanted to move on, and you wanted to forget that trauma, and I don't think the three of us in this podcast sitting here talking, I don't think the three of us have any real understanding of what it would be like to sit in a boat, okay, and watch 1,500 people drown or die of hypothermia is more the case, and not be able to do anything about it. I mean, that is a totally, totally helpless feeling. I mean, it's the same reason both of my dogs came from the local dog pound, and it's like I walked out of the dog pound adopting one dog and feeling horrible guilt because I left all the others behind, so that would be the understanding someone, and again, to go back to Bill Mueller, to understand why Bill Mueller kept his secret all those years and didn't talk. I think it's entirely plausible, and I think that I really do believe he was there.
That's the problem today, that everybody is so I don't want to say self-absorbed, but just nobody's able to place themselves. Like I said, think about that. Again, it's the whole idea. Again, it's like any sort of, again, not to go back to national tragedy, which is the buzzword tonight, but it's just, you can't put yourself in someone's shoes that experienced something like that. Again, surviving the Titanic, surviving 9/11, surviving insert national tragedy here. It's just, it's such a unique experience, never mind for the individual. Again, everybody's experienced with that, and you don't know what's going through their minds. Plus, Bill Mueller was a young guy. It wasn't like he was in his mid-40s. He had a wife and kids, and he knew what it was like to do this, though. He was a young guy. He was formative learning stages, how things, I know even at 25 years old, I'm still learning how things work out.
And you will be at 45 too, trust me. In fact, you two are going to know, mark my words, you will know less at 45 than you did at 25, okay? Because the older you get, the grayer things become. Okay.
That's definitely not comforting at all.
No, it's not comforting.
That's not comforting at all.
And it really, and I'll share another detail with you that's not very comforting. None of us make it out of this existence alive.
I've conceded that.
It's kind of like that's kind of like a given. I know, okay, but you know, I think when I was, you guys are each what, 25? I think when I was 25, I was completely invincible and I could do anything I wanted to do. And I'll tell you what, take care of your joints and your knees, okay? Because you're going to need those going forward, and don't abuse those.
This is great. I don't know if you've listened to any of our other podcasts, but something I say a lot is that we like to hit the real deep philosophical questions on this show. And I'm happy to realize that this episode is no different, that we're hitting all these great life lessons.
Another question for Ryan. Going back real quick to my Titanic 2 and things like this. Considering today that we live in such a nostalgia-rich world, obviously all the ocean liners of the early 20th century are long gone. If somebody had the foresight, and let's just pretend for the sake of argument, someone was able to stash, considering Titanic is obviously at the bottom of the North Atlantic, Britannic is in the Mediterranean, Olympic's the only one that was able to survive. If someone was able to, let's just say, stash that in a closet for 50 years and just stumble, again, I know it doesn't make any sense, but let's just say someone stashed Olympic away and found it in the 70s. Do you think that they would try to restore it as like a Queen Mary experience? Well, considering that it resembled the Titanic so closely.
I think that somebody probably would, but the thing is you know, we have the SS United States, and and the SS United States is in really, really bad shape, and you've got a group that's, you know, been trying to raise money to do a restoration, and they're having problems. You've got the Queen Mary, of course, which the Queen Mary, I am pleased to say that when I saw it a few months ago, that when I was there on the ship a few months ago, the Queen Mary is looking a lot better now because they're actually starting to paint it and they're actually doing some work. But the biggest problem that would work against having, and maybe it would be different because it is Titanic's sister and it is the Olympic, but the biggest problem with these ships is that they are such beasts, and they cost millions of dollars to maintain, and you're talking about tons of upkeep and, you know, lots of paint and lots of things going wrong with them at the age that Olympic, I mean, remember, Olympic would be 107, 108 years old at this, you know, and I think it's very unfeasible, you know, to be able to sustain that as a park or a tourist attraction for any length of time. I'm going to be really honest. I think that there could come a day going forward where the Queen Mary could get scrapped. You know,
really?
I really do believe that because they are under tremendous financial pressure to support that thing, given all of the work that it needs and given all of the things that you know. I will tell you a behind-the-scenes story about the Queen Mary. When we, in the initial first stages, when we began to work on making Titanic, one of the things the network asked me is they said, how are you going to, you know, what are you going to use for the Titanic? And my answer was instantaneous. I'm like, well, we'll use the Queen Mary. You know, it's really the only viable option that we have is to use the Queen Mary. And I tend to be kind of a purist when it comes to history, so it kills me to have to shoot on the Queen Mary, knowing that it doesn't really resemble Titanic at all, but what are you going to do? So I made a trip into Long Beach, and I met the individual who was in charge of filming. And the individual took me on a tour, me and my assistant, both of us were there, on a tour of the ship. And we looked at all of the important areas, you know, with the area where the engines used to be. We looked at the areas where the boiler rooms used to be. We visited the bridge, the staterooms, the hallways, the corridors, the salon, the grand, you know, we were everywhere. And I explained to her, you know, what areas I needed, okay, what I was going to film, and we reached a price. And the price was very reasonable. It was like one day of filming. I was going to do these recreations in like one 12-hour day, and it was going to cost, all said and done, it was going to be something like, you know, I want to say it was going to be something like, you know, $12,000, $13,000, $14,000. So very reasonable. Go back and build that money into the budget. In fact, I built a few more dollars than that into the budget just for security, just so I know that, you know, if something runs over, we've got it covered. So we get greenlit, the film is underway, and I reach back out to this person now via email, and I say in the email, hey, I'm very close to being ready to film. I want to set up a time when it will work for you. I want to work around your schedule, blah, blah, blah. You know, you tell me what we need to do. And she didn't reply. Never emailed me. So after a few emails, then I start to I start calling. And again, I get voicemail, and no one will return my call. So finally, after, you know, I'm starting to get concerned about time. Finally, I'm like, look, the only thing I can do here is go to the city of Long Beach, because the city of Long Beach actually owns the Queen Mary, and they contract with a management company that runs the ship. So I contact Long Beach, and Long Beach, the city, you know, gives me some numbers, and they say, trust me, we'll look into that. We will get somebody to call you back, because, you know, this doesn't really make the city of Long Beach look so good. And so finally, this individual that I had been dealing with, who did not return my calls, calls me back and says to me, she says, okay, well, what areas did you want to use? And I said, well, it's what you showed me. You know, you told me it was this much for the day. I said to you, you're sure it's this much for one 12-hour day to do this? You said yes, you know, and that included the following areas. Well, then she says to me, she says, well, I'm going to have to recalculate that. And I said, well, what do you mean recalculate it? You don't seem to understand here. I took your dollar amount that you gave me, and I built this into a budget for a film. Okay, what do you recalculate? She now insists that the day rate that she gave me was per location on the ship.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, God. So we all end up with an estimate that comes in at like something like $35,000, or, you know, like 3 times the amount that it was supposed to be. And I was so mad at the Queen Mary, I vowed that I would never set foot on the Queen Mary again. And then I had to go down there a couple months ago, so I had to, like, you know, eat my words on that. But you know, it was like, it was just, it was really disappointing to be treated like that by them. And I don't, and you know, she tried to tell me, oh, this was a misunderstanding on your part. And I'm like, no, because my assistant understood the entire thing the same as I did. There was no misunderstanding, because I called her and I said, did I misread this? Did you understand something that I didn't, you know, did I hear something wrong? And she said, no. She goes, we were both there, and you asked her 3 times to clarify that and make sure that. So I was really mad at the Queen Mary, and they put us tremendously behind schedule on the film, because we then had to turn around and we had to build all of the sets that you saw. that all had to be done, I don't remember at this point what the original question was. I hope I answered it.
Oh no, you did. Oh no, you did.
Another example. I'll give you another example of that. Some more Titanic trivia. We filmed on the rescue sequence where they were coming through the gangway door, and some of the other miscellaneous scenes where we were in the cabin with Captain Lord and stuff like that. That was all filmed on a real ship, and that was the United States, the SS Jeremiah O'Brien. Okay, so she was a warship, and she is docked at San Francisco at the wharf. Okay, and so they're open on a daily basis. Tourists can go through. They can see the engine room. She is like one of, I think, in fact, maybe she might be the only ship in the United States that still has a triple expansion reciprocating, or not a triple expansion, but a reciprocating engine. Okay, that is just like Titanic's, identical to Titanic's, just on a much smaller scale. Okay, and the budget, what it takes to run that ship. When I was talking to the people, who own the ship and own the association that holds it, that ship, it would just be mind-blowing if you knew what the budget every month was for just having this ship set there in the water, docked. Not talking about moving anywhere or anything like that. And they were telling me when we were filming, they were like, if you want us to take you out to sea for a day, and you want to film at sea with the ship actually moving, if you need any sequences like that, we can do that. And I'm like, oh, that would be amazing. That would be great. And the lady who runs it, I loved her dearly. She was like, yeah, she goes, that's only about $48,000 a day in fuel. In fuel. Okay. So, I mean, it was like, wow, and then the other thing with like the Jeremiah O'Brien, because it is a ship sitting in the water, is they have to go like every 3 years, I think it is. Every 3 years, the ship has to go to dry dock. And the ship has to be completely overhauled, okay? And they have to, paint it, and they have to fix any rust spots or any leaks here or there or whatever. And it is like $1.2 to $1.4 million to put it in the dry dock, So you're really, to have something like the Olympics sitting there, you're talking about a very expensive proposition that I don't think would probably work in this day and age.
All right, that's I couldn't have asked for a better answer, so thank you.
Right off the bat, I'm kind of amazed, not kind of, very amazed. You answered a lot of my questions without even me having to ask them, which is fantastic.
Well, I'm looking because you're the only one, it's got a video feed going on here, and I'm like looking at your video feed, and it looks like you've got like 2 pages of notes. And you've not asked 2 pages of questions, so
I've just been crossing things off as you're somehow getting to all of them. But I do have some that they slipped under the radar, I guess,
okay.
and you didn't get to them. So this first one, this is kind of about the Titanic, and if you don't know, fine, I totally understand. But it's my understanding that there were, rough estimate, 2,200 people on the Titanic. 700 of them made it off on lifeboats. Okay. Right. So I did a little research into this. Of the 1,500 people that were left on the Titanic, I am interested. I said this to Ryan before we recorded in a previous conversation. I'm of the train of thought that if there's a question humans can think of, let's answer it. And so my question for you is, do we have any idea of how many people killed themselves, committed suicide, before dying from natural causes for the Titanic? Is this anything you've ever heard anybody think about?
I have never heard anything myself about that. I have never, I think what you're getting at is that, I would rather eat a bullet than drown in these icy waters kind of thing, which I mean, I'm sure that it probably did happen. I'm sure that there was probably at least one or maybe a handful of people that elected to go that way. I can tell you that I can't imagine the absolute hell that the firemen and the people in the bowels of the ship must have experienced.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're in it just gives me the creeps to think about them dying down there in the boiler room.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
Because, I mean, you're talking about complete darkness, and you're in a room that everything is steel and everything. I mean, that had to have been just a hellacious way to go. And
Certainly.
I can't even imagine that, you know. But, you know, one of the other things that I think is disappointing is the fact that the boats that did get away could have actually accommodated more people.
Oh.
You know, and you had boats that were like that left the ship that had a capacity of like 48, and they left with 12 people. And of course, it was said that there was a the mindset was that they would release those boats with not enough people, and that way those boats could come back after the sinking. But I don't know. I think maybe that's like planning in hindsight, because the thing about that is you had once these people hit the water, the number is something like 12 minutes. Okay. You had 12 minutes until hypothermia set in at that temperature on the average individual. Okay. And those boats, I mean, as we saw in Jimmy C's film, okay, you know, there was one boat that came back, okay, and plucked Jack and Rose off the door, of course, or off that wood. But you know, by the time that boat came back, those people had drowned and or frozen to death. And another thing that you don't hear addressed very often is the way that the life jackets went on to people and the way that they tied them. Okay, they tied sort of across the rib cage. Zach, have you ever heard this before?
I know of the life jackets that go around the. I know of them, but I don't know any sort of controversy with them.
Well, you know how they tied. Okay, so you know basically the straps from front to back were right on a person's ribs. Okay, what people didn't realize was that when they jumped, if they jumped off the deck, say from 20, 30, 40 feet up on the ship, when they hit the water, think about the physics of this. You have these big bulky life jackets that are made completely of cork. Okay.
Oh God.
Yeah, I think you're getting the gist. Okay, so you hit the water, and let's say a 185-pound guy. What happens? What is the deal with gravity, right? 185 pounds is going down, and it hits the water, and it's going to keep on going into the water deeper and deeper, right? Until it loses momentum. What happens to the life jacket when it hits the water? Okay, that life jacket is instantly buoyant. So you have a human body going one direction and a life jacket going that immediately pulls the other way. So you had victims that had their ribs broke, that literally suffocated because they could not breathe. So that got them probably before the drowning or anything else.
Oh, I never thought about that.
Oh my Lord, I never thought about that. Oh jeez.
Yeah, that was actually, I forget how that came about. I don't remember if it was an examination of bodies or whatever, but you know, you only had, I think they only recovered 328 bodies of the 1,500.
Wow.
And one of the things that they don't talk about was you can find accounts and you can read about this stuff. The North Atlantic sea lanes, people were seeing bodies for weeks floating in the water. It's a very macabre subject. There was another ship. In one of the collapsibles, there were two people that had died in one of the collapsible boats before they arrived at the Carpathia. So the crew of the Carpathia didn't even bother retrieving the collapsible from the water. They let it drift, and they just left these two bodies in it, right? Mm-hmm. So another ship came along, I don't remember how long, a week later, a few days later or whatever, and they tied up to the collapsible, and they were going to get the bodies. I don't know whether they were planning on like burying them or, at sea or whatever they were going to do. But they actually, the crew guy went down there and I think he grabbed, if I remember reading this, he grabbed like the arms of one of the victims and the arms came off. Ooh. Because of the decomposition of being at sea. That was a pretty macabre element of thinking, was the recovery of bodies and what happened to those victims.
Well, I have a question real quick. I'll let Rob finish. Ryan, why is it, I guess maybe it's the idea that maybe some of these things are so gruesome, but like considering the fact, like Rob said, like there's really not a lot of, or I think you said it too, not a lot of new Titanic information out there. Like something like that, I would even again. I think it's fair to say that I'm a Titanic enthusiast, and I've never heard this before. It's so why isn't this more, instead of retelling again the poor people in steerage? Why isn't there more information like this out there? More, I don't want to say backstory, but more stuff around it. Is there a reason why we don't hear about this stuff, or it's because people just don't think that will sell, or it's too gruesome for contemporary audiences?
Well, you have to understand this, TV, I am kind of an anomaly sort of as a small filmmaker, as a small independent guy, and the difference is that like a lot of times the people who produce content for television, okay, a lot of those companies that produce content for television, they produce stuff. They produce, like, I'm thinking of one company off the top of my head that produces, they produce content for Discovery Channel. They produce content for Reels. They produce content for everybody. So you have, 300 people working for this company. You have producers, you have directors, you have writers, and these companies count on making content and selling it to keep their doors open and keep their people employed. So it's kind of like television programming. This is just my perception, my feeling, having seen it, is it's like mass-produced television. Okay. And you don't ever, to me, you don't ever really have people who are like experts in a field or experts on a subject or have a passion for a subject that tell the story that they want to tell. Like in Titanic, I told the story that I wanted to tell. I made the film that I wanted to go see, and at the same time sort of paid respect to Diana and whatnot. But you lose that when you deal with these big production companies that just, hey, great, Titanic, great idea. Let's just rough something together. Let's come up with one anchor point that's maybe like some new piece of data, and we're going to build a whole show around that, and we're going to punch it out in 3 months, and we're going to get it on the network by the 4th month, And I don't do things like that. I grow things from the ground up. And I do things that I'm naturally curious about and that I care about and that I want to explore. So I think, I hope that answers your question. I don't think you have a lot of, I may use the term organic experts who get to be in charge of making their own TV show.
No, that was a good tangent. So the next one I have, because this one is more about your movie than the actual Titanic, because you like I said, you hit all these questions. Zack is probably going to roll his eyes at this one, but I really want your opinion on something from your movie. You gave a little context of it before, and when you were talking about Ken Marshall and how he's an artist, and I think I knew that a little bit about him, but when you talked about it more, that kind of put this in a new perspective. But in your movie, Ken Marshall says that he basically says at some point during the sinking, the Titanic looked like a sagging birthday cake. Yes. Okay, this has resonated with me immensely.
Titanic definitely looked sick. It looked like a sagging birthday cake to survivors in the lifeboats looking back at the ship.
When I first heard this, I was just like, what does this mean? And Zack and I have had many conversations about what we think a sagging birthday cake is, but I would very much like to get your opinion. What do you think of when you hear sagging birthday cake?
Well, when I hear the term birthday cake, an actual cake is kind of secondary to what I immediately think of. what they call the gigantic cruise ships, like the Carnival cruise liners. And have you ever heard to them referred to as the birthday cake?
No.
I've never heard that either.
That's what they call those great big cruise liners. A lot of people refer to them as a birthday cake because, or maybe even a wedding cake, because of all of the levels and the tiers and the decks stacked on top of one another. So that's the term. That's why they sometimes refer to these new ships as being a cake, a giant wedding cake or a giant birthday cake, because that is kind of, when you look at it from the side, it's kind of what they look like. They look ridiculous. By the way, I think that all of the cruise ships today, excepting maybe a couple of the Cunard lines, big liners, I think every one of the cruise liners today is just a hideous looking, just disgusting, pretentious. I mean, who designed these ugly things? I mean, the thing about the Titanic and the Olympic and the Mauritania and the Lusitania and the big, liners from the early 1900s going into the 1930s, those were beautiful ships. Their lines were beautiful. Their colors were beautiful. Their funnels were beautiful. I mean, everything about them was gorgeous. And then you look at these hideous things, these hideous wedding cakes that they produce one after another these days, and I think they're horrible. But I think that when Ken is using the term a sagging birthday cake, that is, he's paying homage, I think, to the fact that we call ships cakes, and of course in the case of Titanic, here we have one that's down by the head and listing to one side, because Titanic listed to the starboard side initially after the impact, and then slowly began a transformation to the port side, So I think that's probably where he's getting that at.
Okay, I am, my mind is blown. That's the best way to say it, because I said to Zack in one of our discussions about this, I said it rather jokingly. I was like, do we think that sagging birthday cake is a colloquialism that we are just unaware of? And while I presented it as a colloquialism, like, oh, well, there's just a certain part of the world where people are like, if something's broken or it's going down, they call it a sagging birthday cake. Right. But now I'm getting that it's the birthday cake is the slang term in the industry, and he's just added sagging to it. This is great. This has put such a new perspective on that line for me.
Good. You have no idea, Ryan, how much that's been. Because we originally started talking about this when you tweeted out that Reels would be re-airing it soon. And ever since I shared it with him, that has been bugging him. Like, every single time I bring this up, he's like, I want to know what that means.
I love it. It's such a strange thing. I mean, I'm such a huge fan of weird phrases and just esoteric things like that. And I would never put these two phrases, like birthday cake and sagging, I would have never put in a sentence on my own. I needed to hear someone else say it for me to even to be able to think about it, and it was great.
Well, there you go. Now, every single time that you see one of these behemoth, gigantic liners on TV, or if you ever take a cruise on one of them or whatever, you're never going to look at the ship the same again. You're going to look at it. You're going to wonder where the candles are at.
And now I can just confuse people when I point at ships and I call it birthday cake or wedding cake. And then when I tell them the story, they're going to be like, why do you know this stuff? Okay, no, great. That was a fantastic answer. I'm ecstatic from that answer. I have one more question for you, and I think it's a question that Zack might have as well. And something that we do on our show every single time is whenever we talk about a movie, Zack and I always talk about what do we eat during it? Like, what's the snack that we have during the movie or something like that? And this, since you are our first guest and you're actually the creator of this movie, let's get it right from the source. What do you recommend? What snack do you recommend for your movie?
Well, I can tell you, I've never really given that any thought, but but I would definitely say something that you can drink with ice water.
Oh, okay.
I do know that the night that we watched it on TV, the night that it debuted, we actually had a Chinese buffet set up. So we watched Titanic, with Chinese food, which I guess would be in honor of like the 8 Chinese people that were on the Titanic. So
that's great.
That's great. This is better than the sagging cake answer.
Yes, we thought about getting a sagging cake, but then just decided against it. So.
Oh man, I've written these down. These are now forever ingrained in my memory. I have to figure out how to set up a Chinese buffet if I'm going to show this to anybody else.
There you go. You have to do it. You have to do it in the style of the director.
Yes.
So we had a very nice party that night. That was a lot of fun, and we had a screening party for the film in. We had a screening party for the film in August when we had a pretty solid little cut of the film in August and of 16. So, it debuted in January of 17. And the film changed from August until the screening in October. The film changed night and day. I mean, it was like lots of revisions, lots of notes and all that. And then we had Ed Asner actually hosted at his house the debut party that night. So we all sat in his study and had a big party and lots of people and Chinese food and plenty of booze and, and we watched Titanic, a film that by this point I could recite to you in my sleep, line by line by line, and we had really so much fun making that film. Sometimes films are a absolute nightmare to make, and you pray that they'll be over with, soon. But Titanic had great synergy. It had a lot of team players. Our cast and crew was really talented and was really good. Ed and Francis were a hoot to work with. The outtakes by themselves are hysterical, and unfortunately will probably never be shown. So
we'd have to entice you into some giant Chinese buffet and party to show them off or something like that. Okay, things to think about for the future.
There you go. So, and maybe there'll be a sequel.
Ah, yes. Yeah, we can always hope. The fans can always hope.
I have a concept in mind for the sequel that I don't think has ever been done, and I think that it's an aspect of the story that would be very interesting to tell, and it would be very informative, and I think if done right, I think it would be visually entertaining. And I mean, I look at Titanic, I look at my film, and I see some missed opportunities. I see some things that I would have liked to have done different. Mm-hmm. And for one, I did not get to play with my models nearly as much as what I wanted to. We had actually shot some components that was, if edited, if composited together and put together, it would have given us a visual of the Carpathia sailing into New York, okay, with the Statue of Liberty in the distance and the whole thing, which I've never seen done before. We built a, what is the Carpathia? I think the Carpathia is 6 foot long that we built. Mm-hmm. And and the Californian is like 8 feet long. And I would have loved to have had some more visuals. We just did we were just so far out of time that it was very hard. I just had to like get in and get out with some visual splashes in a couple of days' time of those two ships. So you just kind of see them in the film in passing. So if we did do a sequel, I would definitely like to get those models out and play with them. And we're also right now building a 13-foot long Titanic. So I would like to maybe play with that in the future as well, but what I think as a director, I think directors are no different than actors. If you talk to a lot of actors actors will always say, I hate watching myself on camera because I always see the missed opportunities, the things that I would have liked to have done, that I should have done, that I didn't do. And I kind of look at Titanic the same way. And though I am happy with the film, I'm thinking, God, I could have just polished that a little better. I could have pulled that off a little better, or I could have done this, or we could have built another set. Or again, it goes back to the fact that if I had free reign, the film still wouldn't be finished to this day.
Mm-hmm, yep. No, that's great to hear. Because I think that whenever that's a sign of someone caring about their product, that they look back at it and they're always like, oh, I have all these great ideas, no matter how subtle or tiny the detail, you're always looking to improve it. And that's great. That's better than just like, hey, I got it done, look at it, it exists. You're always thinking of, man, this is something I care about, and I can work this and make it into the product that I'm envisioning. And it just sucks that we have deadlines and from other people to meet.
Exactly. It's like right now, I'm working on another film right now on the murder of Ronnie Chasen. And Ronnie was a Hollywood publicist and pretty big muckety muck in LA. Very successful lady, and she'd gone to the premiere of the movie Burlesque. Mm-hmm. And it was November 16th, 2010, November 15th, 2010. And, this was a woman who went to every movie and every event under the sun representing clients. So she didn't go for pleasure. She was working during award season like every night of the week. And she left the Chinese theater, went to an after party, was on her way home, was driving down Sunset, stopped at an intersection where she was going to make a left turn. And someone came up to the window of the car, the passenger side window, and shot her 4 times and killed her, And it's a very interesting case. And what I've been really enjoying about the Chasen film is that the Chasen film is very much me. I did Amityville independently, but then Amityville sort of morphed into a network project. And then I did Titanic as a network project. And now I have another network project that I'm getting ready to start shooting. But the great thing about Chasen being independent is that it's allowed me to return to my roots, to being independent, to not having a deadline to deal with, to not having a development executive saying, no, do it this way, don't do it that way. Mm-hmm. There's nobody other than me charting the course for this film, and I get to sort of make the creative decisions that I feel need to be made. And that, I'm not saying, I'm not knocking network at all. As I've told you guys, I greatly enjoy working for Reels. I love working for Reels. I think that they are just awesome people. They're very low key. They're very easy to work with. And let's face it, it's great to know that you're making something that is going to hit the mainstream, that you're actually going to have an audience for it when you're done with it. But it's also equally great. I think every filmmaker should do it. I think you should take the gigs that you need to take for promoting your career and advancing your career and maybe making a few dollars for yourself at the same time. But I think you should always return to doing things that you're passionate about and doing things independently, because it really is very satisfying and very fulfilling, and I tremendously love the independent realm of things. If I could just make some money at it.
Yep. No, great. I love that perception on this, and I'm just even more excited to learn about these things I have no background in when you're ready to tell me about them.
Well, we talked about Jim Cameron. We talked about like how Cameron sort of inspired me, like in the Amityville film, to try and make the film visually more interesting and to go visually further than what anyone else had done before me. And, another guy that really inspired me was Quentin Tarantino. I like his films. I wouldn't say that I am, obsessed by any means with either Tarantino or Cameron, but Tarantino really hit it on the head for me when he was doing an interview and somebody asking, what would you say? I think the question was along the lines, would you advocate to a guy who wants to be a filmmaker or girl, would you recommend film school? And his answer was no. I don't recommend film school at all. Take the money that you're going to take or that you're going to spend going to film school. Take the money and go make the damn film that you want to make, okay? Because that is going to teach you everything that you need to know about filmmaking right then and there. And if you still, when you get done making one film, if you still want to make film after that experience, then you're probably a filmmaker at that point. And I thought that was incredibly sage advice because I didn't go to film school. I picked up a camera and taught myself cameras and taught myself lenses and taught myself all kinds of things. And I'm still teaching myself those things. You never stop learning. You have to always keep it, and you have to learn, in my opinion, you have to learn like every aspect of it. Like with Amityville, making that, when we started out making that independently, we didn't have any money. We just didn't have any money to make this thing. And so I was out of necessity. I was the writer, I was the director, I was the producer, I was the janitor. I did everything because I didn't have a cast and crew, that was at my beck and call to help me. We were paying everybody that was involved when we hired them to work for us. We were dealing with shoestring budgets, to our cast, and everybody stuck in there with us, thankfully, through the long duration that it took to make the film, and then when that was all done, in addition to writing it and then directing it and serving as the director of photography, then I had to edit the thing, and I kind of now understand the whole film process from beginning to end, and and again, still learning. I like to think with Amityville, I will say that it's not really the movie that I learned how to make a film. It was the movie wherein I learned how not to make a film.
Yep.
I look at some of the audio mistakes that we made, and I look at some of the visual mistakes, and I look at some of the flubs in the thing, and I'm like, yep, I'm never going to do that again, And you learn as you go, and you pick up more and more, practical knowledge. And now, and another thing that I used to do, like with Amityville, was being a freshman filmmaker, not being confident in yourself and in your eye. I shot scenes, and I had so much coverage of the scene because I would shoot it from so many different angles to make sure that I had it. Whereas by now, I'm to the point where it's like, we slate it, we shoot it, I look at it, I'm like, yeah, we got it. Let's do it one more time for safety and move on. Mm-hmm. And maybe instead of shooting 6 different angles on the thing, I only shoot 3 different angles now. And I have this confidence that I know what I shot. I know I got it. I know we're good. So I'm getting a little faster as I go too. So
that's awesome. That's awesome to hear, and I love that, like I said before, that perception you have, always learning. There's always ways to improve, whether it be your product, your craft, and that's great. That's what I want from the people creating these things and releasing movies and music and TV shows, just something they care about. It's great to hear. Great to hear.
The trick is to also get good people around you.
Yeah.
That make you look good as well. And definitely with my cast and crew, the people, that's the thing about my cast is that if you look at like Titanic, for instance, in Titanic, you have an individual, a guy named Josh Bauer, and Josh is First Officer William Murdoch. Okay, in Amityville, Josh Bauer was the prosecuting attorney Gerard Sullivan. Okay, if you look at Jack Phillips, the wireless operator. That's a guy by the name of John Hybrick. John Hybrick played Ronnie DeFeo in the Amityville Thing. Tom Metcalf, who played Bruce Ismay. I've done numerous things with Tom Metcalf, through the years on the stage and some different readings and some stuff like that. Of course, Ed Asner. I mean, I've been working with Ed for about 15 years now, and I'm very comfortable. I like having repeats. I like having my cast come back to me again and again, and my crew come back to me again and again, because once you start working with, once you've worked with somebody that really pulled it off for you and really came prepared and was really all about it, then that they're going to bring that preparedness and that energy level to the next project. So you can cast them with absolute confidence and know that they've got this. So that's another fun element. You always, I think, in anything that you do in life is too short to surround yourself with people you can't stand. You've got to build your team and build your crew. And I had a wise friend once that told me, that everything in life, particularly in business, is about the relationship and the relationships that you build and the relationships that you maintain. And that doesn't mean that everybody that you work with is going to like you and that you're not going to have fallings out and issues along the way. But, it really is, to me, I like the idea of just treating people right and building those relationships. And I love the fact that my actors email me and that they're constantly asking me, what are we doing next? What's our next project? When are you going to start filming? I want a part in this. Can I have a part in this? That's a lot.
That's great. Great stuff. Well,
absolutely.
Ryan, you have answered all of my questions with great detail that I just absolutely love. Zach, is there anything else you had?
Titanic, there's another aspect that no one ever talks about. After the ship obviously collided with the iceberg, Captain Smith halts the engines. And then, I forget the exact timeline, but about 15, 20 minutes later, the ship starts going forward again, which increases the rate of the water coming in because he's deliberately plowing the ship into the water. Is there, I guess I'm still working my way through Diana's book. Is there a reason why he reorders the ship to keep going after about 20 minutes after the initial contact with the iceberg?
You're going to love the director's cut, because that's one of the things that we dropped out of the 2-hour just because it got a little monotonous, but it's in the director's cut.
All right, don't tell me then. I'll wait for that.
Okay, well, I was going to say, I can tell you, but I mean...
Don't. Please don't. I don't want to know. Let it be a surprise. I that's one thing I'm always fascinated about. Please don't tell me. I can always, after I watch the 4-hour cut, and I can then harass you again with even more questions.
There you go. There you go. Well, it really was not. I'm not going to give you any spoilers here, but it was really not about. It was trying to figure out. They were trying to test the waters, so to speak, to see if they could move without greatly, without exacerbating the flooding situation. Okay. And we're relatively certain that they put the kibosh to it because we figure Thomas Andrews intervened and said, you don't have time for this experiment. Okay, you've got to get these boats away. And that's why they then stopped. Because you're absolutely right. They actually, when Titanic came to a stop, okay, remember, she had hard starboarded, okay, so she had turned to her left, trying to avoid the berg, and then Murdoch had hard ported, okay, so that when Titanic actually came to a stop, she was facing north, okay, and Smith kept it on that course. And again, I won't go any further because I won't spoil it for you.
All right, I'll take that. I'll take it. I'm happy.
But there's even the collision. There is even still a debate and an argument over the collision. Over how the events went down. there is no doubt in our mind, and gradually over time, Diana's theory has been pretty much accepted, that the lookouts did not see the iceberg before Will Murdoch saw it. Okay, Murdoch saw it first. Murdoch had already ordered evasive action. And as we talked about in the film, that is evidenced by how long, remember when, the lookout picks up the phone, and the phone rings in the bridge for an extended period of time. Okay, and I think even in Jimmy C's film, we hear the lookout say, "Come on, pick up the phone, you bloody bastard," I think is the line.
Pick up, you bastards!
And then finally, the officer strolls up. I think it was Boxhall strolls up and answers the phone and said, no, it wasn't Boxhall. God, I can't remember this. I should know this. The officer strolls up and he says, "What did you see?" He says, "Iceberg dead ahead." By the way, it was iceberg dead ahead, not ever iceberg right ahead. Okay? And that's because dead is actually a nautical term. Okay? If something is dead on, that means it's right at 12 o'clock off the bow. Okay? So the lookout did not say iceberg right ahead. He said iceberg dead ahead. Okay? And the reason that they didn't answer the phone, if they were so nonchalant about picking up the phone, was because they already knew what was in front of them. Murdoch had already ordered action. They were already busy taking action. And now let me ask you something. Here's a question for you, and we didn't really talk about it in the film because we kind of ran out of time with it. But Zack, did Titanic reverse her engines like we see in Jimmy C's film?
Oh, God. There's an answer to this. I know I've read this before. I'm going to say... Oh, my God. I'm trying to... Because I know that's been... Again, it's not a major sticking point, but I know that is an issue with some people. Isn't it debatable whether that happened?
Well, the actual answer is no, she did not reverse her engines.
That's what I thought.
Okay, she stopped engines. Okay, and do you know why you stop engines? Because you don't know if you're going to hit this iceberg or not. Okay, the last thing that you want to do is have your propellers turning full bore and have the propellers hit the ice underneath the water and bust off propeller blades and do massive damage to the driveline of the ship, basically. Mm-hmm. So the answer is no, he would have stopped the engines. Murdoch would have stopped dead cold and let the forward momentum, drive him around the iceberg. Okay? So the whole thing, as dramatic and terrific as the sequence was in Cameron's film, where we see him like waiting for the steam to come down, and then he engages the reversing engine, and then the whole thing, they bring the steam back up and the whole thing begins. It didn't happen.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, Ryan, can I pitch you on the idea of maybe instead of a 4-hour cut, there's a 6-hour cut? Can I interest you in that, maybe?
Are you talking about the documentary or this episode of our podcast?
Well, this is gonna be a commentary to the 4-hour cut.
Yeah. No, as much as that is, as intriguing as that possibly is, the answer is no. Okay.
Aww.
We have closed the book on Titanic sinking, the myths at this point, and we will see what the future brings in terms of a sequel, and mainly and most importantly, we're going to see if I can find a way to get into the number 5 and 6 boiler room on the wreck to see if we can see any of the potential fire damage that we think might have been there.
Cool beans.
You know how much Chinese food we would need for a 6-hour cut of this movie?
Yeah, considering after you eat it, you're hungry again in an hour.
That's why it's a buffet. You don't have to worry about that.
Exactly. So is that everything? Did we get it?
I
think so.
I still have like 4 pages worth of questions, but that's for the sequel. I'll wait for the sequel to ask those questions. No, but I think we're done here. And I'd like to say, Ryan, this means so much. You are our inaugural guest. unlike the Titanic, our maiden voyage with a guest went fabulously.
Good. Well, don't run it into any icebergs.
No, definitely not.
I want to say the same thing, Ryan. Thank you so much. The Titanic stuff, like I mentioned a bunch of times, this is not something that is wildly interesting to me, but it's been a pleasure sitting down and talking to someone who is just passionate. I love that, and so thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys seem pretty driven on this too.
When your next film comes out, we're gonna, like, whether that be a year, 2 years from now, you're definitely, it's definitely in the Cinemodities canon. We're putting it preliminarily. It's in the canon.
I can tell you that the next one that we're just starting prep on is definitely a Cinemoddity. Okay, it will definitely fit the bill. It is such an eclectic, crazy, bizarre story, and it involves a mainstream serial killer that you've heard of, and it's definitely a very different angle and a very different take. It's going to be a fun film to make. It's going to be a very riveting film to the audience. I think the audience is really going to like our main character in it, and it's going to be a hoot. And we will probably we haven't worked out the exact timeline yet, but it will probably air, I'm going to guess, maybe sometime around this time next year. Okay. And then of course I have Ronnie Chasen kind of coming along at the same time. We're like neck deep in that thing, and I'm hoping we start shooting recreations here in, I think May 18th is when we start shooting some of the crime scene stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking that, we might have that out by mid-year next year as well, if everything continues to go at the pace that it's going. And, and then there's a couple of other things that I'm there's another project I'm very passionate about that's a historical 1920s piece that I really want to do, and we're pitching that. And of course, we're talking Titanic sequel, and any number of different things going on here, and I have no idea what's going to materialize. That's the thing about this business; it's so damn crazy. I didn't anticipate making Titanic, and it just came out of nowhere, and the next thing I know, I'm making Titanic, a film that I never thought I would ever get to make. And, you're talking to somebody, you're talking to a development exec, you're talking to a head of a network, and you bring something up, you say something, and all of a sudden somebody jumps on it, and they're like, oh, that's a great idea, we should do that, and voila, we're off to the races on something, so it's kind of a bizarre life, and, I don't think most people would probably really want to live it, because I think everybody thinks that, when you see something that I did on TV, the perception is always that, oh, well, he must be wealthy beyond his wildest dreams, and he must be rolling in the dough and living this charmed great existence. The business, it is really not like that at all. You get a decent budget, you end up spending more. You always end up spending more than what you want to spend making the film, especially when you're an idiot like me that just keeps writing more scenes. Oh yeah, let's do a full Carpathia reshoot, for Titanic, which wasn't even in the original script. Oh yeah, let's shoot this, let's do that, let's add these scenes on, and so I'm by no means, by any stretch of the imagination, wealthy, and you put up with a lot of crap in this business. I mean, there's so much behind the scenes stuff. The first thing that you do when you start shooting a film is you start dealing almost out of the gate, you start dealing with insurance people, because you have to have production insurance to cover the entire production and anything that could possibly go wrong. So you have to wade through that and get all these applications and quotes done, and then you get that insurance and you make the film, and then when you get done making the film, then you have to carry E&O insurance on top of that. okay, you know, that covers you in the event of a libel or a defamation suit, you know, so you get to spend a bunch of time in a room with attorneys and insurance people. I mean, it's really, there's so much in this business that people don't see that you do on a daily basis. If it were just about going and playing with actors on location and cameras and sinking the Titanic and, you know, doing all these things, that would be a picnic. But, you know...
Well, Ryan, you've done a great job of deglamorizing the business for me. There goes all the sports cars, the premieres, the gorgeous women. There goes, it's just, you talk to insurance adjusters all day.
Yeah, exactly. And lawyers. Let's not forget the lawyers, you know.
Yeah,
you know, I can tell you, you know, between the banker and the lawyer, let me put it like this. If you can arrange a day where you can meet with your accountant or your banker, followed then by a meeting with your lawyer, followed then by a meeting with your insurance agent. I've just given you the recipe for what we call the trifecta of a fucked up day.
This is fantastic.
So anytime that you guys want to have your bubble burst and your illusion of this business destroyed, just give me a call.
You're only one call away?
I'm one call away with the horrible stories.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's keep in touch. We need a reality check every now and then.
Okay, guys.
All right, Ryan. It's been an absolute blast. It really has.
Good. Same here. Good luck with your editing and all that good stuff. You've got a lot of material to deal with.
Fantastic, and thank you so much, Ryan. It really means a lot. It does.
You guys be well, and good luck with all that you do.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.